How have you found it in Cambridge, being from a state school background?
I love it because my favourite flex is I didn't pay a thing for my education, yet we've all ended up at the same place.
Icon.
I think there are things that maybe I'm Joe. I'm a fourth year vet here at Cambridge, studying at City Sussex. I did maths, biology, chemistry, and I got 3 stars.
Okay. Could you talk us through the application process?
Like medicine, veterinary, you have to apply for before the 15th of October, or at least it was when I was applying. And for Oxbridge, that's the same for all subjects. And basically you do, I think it depends on the uni, it's starting to become less, but maybe like 10 weeks of EMS. Probably be completely fine with like 5. Most of those would be in a vet practice, but also things like dairy farm, like lambing, that sort of thing. And then, so you do all your work experience, then you write a personal statement, send all that into the unis, then you get an interview, or don't, depends. I think Bristol actually don't interview anymore, but most of the others do. All of the others do. And then you do your interview, and then see if you get in.
What universities did you apply to and why?
So I applied to Liverpool. I applied there because I'm from Manchester, so it's kind of nice to have one that's quite close to home. It's also probably the biggest like cohort of vets, so they give out quite a lot of offers. I applied to Cambridge, obviously, loads of reasons. Like I just really like this whole like old vibe. Its reputation is like super good, and also I'm quite like going far away, so I knew I wasn't, as much as I just said I applied to Liverpool because it's close to home, I also knew that I kind of wanted to go a bit further afield. I applied to RVC, so that's London's Royal Veterinary College. I went to a summer school there actually in 6th form, and it was like the best week ever. I recommend that, Sutton Trust Summer School, if you want to go. And that was really, really good. Like I actually was close to picking RVC over Cambridge, and it was my reserve choice, but obviously decided not. And then Surrey, which was a bit of a like on a whim. So I applied before they had their accreditation because they hadn't got a full like cohort through the whole course yet. And so it was a bit of a risk applying because like obviously there's a chance they could then fail their accreditation. Accreditation means basically like this governing body that decides that all of the vet schools are like good enough. I mean, they got it now, so it's fine. But yeah, I applied there because it was quite modern. Again, like far away, but closer to London without being so expensive. But yeah.
Do you have any sort of general application process tips?
Yeah, so work experience wise, I'd say quality over quantity is like the main thing. Don't go out and do like 20 weeks in one practice because it's not helpful. Like you need to see different practices if you can, don't stress if you can't. And also like I went into work experience and thought like, okay, I've got sort of a year to do it because you mostly usually start at start of 6th form, and that's sort of a year before you then apply to uni. And so I picked a placement or 2 placements that I thought they were a bit sort of like unusual. So like that would be things like I went to a lab like that did all like research testing on actually the flu jab, which I know isn't strictly related to veterinary, but like that sort of scientific vibe is really like unis really like it when they see that in their students. Also things like abattoirs or that sort of thing. So try and get some work experience that's a bit different to what everyone else is going to have. And then personal statement, like everyone goes for the usual, same with medicine, like the usual, I want to combine my love with science and like animals or humans if you're a medic. And like, and it just doesn't work. I mean, sometimes it's the truth, other times you just say it because you think that's what they want to hear and they definitely don't. Just talk about what you've done in your work experience, try and link it to stuff that you've like read or like studied in class, and just make it like interesting. Don't follow the same boring like structure. Yeah, and then interviews. What tips would I give for interviews? It depends on where you're going. So there's MMI interviews, which are these multiple mini interviews, which is basically like speed dating, or at Cambridge, and I think a few others, they do panel interviews, which is basically like 3 people sat opposite you and you're being interviewed. I'd just say like don't go into it with any expectations, just go in really relaxed, like have a look over your work experience notes so that you've got an idea of a case that you could talk about. If they ask you to, they probably will. And maybe have a look over some of your science notes if you're going into a panel interview, especially for Cambridge. But don't revise loads, like just be really chill about it. Oh, I will also say as well, for Cambridge you have to sit an admissions assessment, literally like the most awful test you'll ever do, and I wouldn't worry about it because I'm pretty sure I failed it and like I'm here, so don't worry about it.
Does it matter which college you get into?
There's 2 sides to this. everyone or most people when they get here, even if they've not applied to this college, after a few terms, they're like, I love my college and I think it's the best. And so on that end of the stick, like, no, in that you can be pulled to a new college and you'll end up really liking it, and majority of the time you'll meet really good people and have a good time. Equally, like, if you're applying to John's, they can give you a lot of money. And so if you need like financial help or that sort of thing, or like, I don't know, you want to go on trips and you need, especially for veterinary or like medicine, if you want to go and do placements abroad and you need financial help, then obviously like places like John's or any of the like older, bigger colleges are going to have way more money than some of the smaller colleges like Wolfson. And so on that end of the stick, yes. So it depends what you're after.
Well, if you were going through the application process again and you had to apply to a different college that wasn't Sydney, which one would you apply to?
It's a toss-up between John's, because they've got money. I also actually really like John's. I think it's a really nice college, and the people that I've met there anyway, the medics especially, are really, really nice. So I picked John's or Emmanuel. I think most people that go to Sydney would say Emmanuel when someone asks them like which other college they pick. I think it's because they are like fairly similar in that both central, both next to a Sainsbury's, and also like just friendly vibes. So yeah, Emma and John's I think would be my top two choices.
And what do you think of Sydney?
I really like Sydney. I think, like I said before, like most people will end up really liking their college. Last year I lived like on Sydney Street, and so I leave my room into one of the old courts, which was obviously so nice, and then walk like 10 metres across the road and be straight into Sainsbury's. So that was nice. Also just like, again, like Emma, the general vibes in Sydney are really chill. No one's there to sort of top the Tompkins table or like do amazingly well in their exams. Like, people are there to just like have a good time, and yeah, I really, really like Sydney.
So next up, we're going to talk about life in Cambridge. When you moved into Cambridge, what things do you think you had to adjust to, and what did you find most surprising?
In terms of having to adjust to things, I think there's things that maybe everyone has to adjust to regardless of where they go to uni, and it's just sort of like getting used to living alone and sort of doing that whole thing yourself. In a way, Cambridge is easier than other unis, I'd say, because you sort of get like pampered a bit with like bedders, and like if you want to go to a hall to get food, then you can do rather than cooking for yourself. And so in that regard, like there are things that make Cambridge easier for people to transition. So I guess like that was a bit of an adjustment. And then things that shocked me or not surprised me about Cambridge was, I mean, I expected to come and everyone be like really studious and sort of like not really get much else done. And that, as much as that is the case, or at least the first part of it is, that doesn't then mean that I think people here in a way are more motivated and fit more in than people do at other unis. When I speak to my friends from other unis, vast majority of them, not to shade them, but like they don't do anything other than like hang out with their friends, which is great. I think the fact that Cambridge is so intense and so like busy, it makes people like plan and fit things in more, and so you end up doing more stuff than if you had a day doing nothing. So I think that shocked me in a good way. I really like that.
Similar sort of question. What's a common misconception?
Exactly that. I think people just expect that everyone's going to be working like 8 a.m. till 10 p.m. Some days you have to do that, not often if you plan it right. So I think that was also like I think people do expect everyone here to be mega rich, and I think definitely at a certain time like that was the case, but we're heading now into like, or we are already there in many respects, into a place where like there's so many people from different backgrounds here, and that's really refreshing and nice. And it's nice to have people that have come from a really like rich background, or a really like, you know, a private school education, then like sat next to in a formal hall someone that's come from, you know, a state school, and then everyone sat there in the same hall. Like, I just think that's really cool, and like big ups to state school kids.
Woo! That actually leads on to the next question. How have you found it in Cambridge being from a state school background?
I love it, because my favourite flex is I didn't pay a thing for my education, yet we've all ended up at the same place.
Icon.
I think there are things that maybe make it slightly... This links back into what I was saying about money. And Sydney is not rich, but it's also not poor. And so if I've ever wanted to go on, I don't know, like the ski trip, as much as they've not paid for the ski trip, there's been money available through like bursaries and stuff that Cambridge and Sydney specifically has helped me out with. I think if you go to a poorer college coming in as a state school kid, maybe that's slightly harder because there's not that money available, and so then the gap between people that have come from an affluent background to state school kids is like different, or more different. But I've actually found it fine, and I'm also not the type of person that's sort of intimidated by privately educated kids or people. I think some people come in, especially people from the north actually, and they're not used to that whole private school vibe, and so then when they're confronted with it with a lot of people here at Cambridge, then it's a bit intimidating to them, and then they feel like they can't sort of not compete but match that level of like intellect. And I don't think that should be the case, and I don't think people should feel like that, and that's something that I've never felt, because we've all ended up at the same place and you deserve to be here regardless. So yeah, I find it quite good.
Apart from the worry that everyone was going to be working from 8 o'clock till whenever, was there anything else that you were worried about, and was it a valid worry?
I think maybe specifically to do with like the vet course, Cambridge can sometimes have a bit of a reputation of being like purely academic, and like anything that's practical based is sort of left to last minute, and so that's, I mean, I'm only just getting to sort of experience that now because I'm only just starting clinical years, but that was something that I was maybe a bit sort of concerned about, and it was one of the factors that I was contemplating going to RVC over Cambridge for, was I knew that RVC was in many ways much more practical than Cambridge. And there are elements of that are true in that I know that Cambridge is very academic based, but equally I think now I've done 4 years of the course, or 3.5 years of the course, like I know that it's not all true, and as much as there is a big focus on that, especially in preclinical years, there's still a lot of practical training that goes into it, and so that's been quite a nice balance actually for like the type of person I am, so that's been quite good.
Okay, so we'll move on to the course. Do you want to just describe the basic course structure?
For Cambridge specifically?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so for Cambridge it's a 6-year course, which is a bit different to everywhere else. Everywhere else is 5 years. So your first 2 years, years 1 and 2, are basically, like I said before, the scientific sort of background of vet med. And a lot of those courses, actually everything but anatomy and some of the bits, but mostly anatomy, everything else is shared with the medics. Some people don't like that because they go into the lectures and it's, I'm not going to lie, like a lot of it is based off human physiology. I never really minded it for 2 reasons. One is human physiology is actually not that different to veterinary physiology, and so in the grand scheme of things, like, it makes no difference. And the second reason being, most colleges for vet med will only have 2, maybe 3, sometimes 1 vet student. So in my case, it's me and one other, Michael. And as much as that's really nice, if you were just going to the lectures or you were just going to practicals with that one person, you depend a lot on them. And in my case, we like, me and Michael get on well, but sometimes you might not get on well, and that becomes a bit of like an awkward sort of experience. Whereas sharing those lectures and some practicals with the medics in first and second year, like, it makes the group bigger. There's more people to like hang around with. You're not as dependent on that one person, and it's more of like a group going together rather than just you and one other person. So I really liked that. So that's first and second year, sort of the basics. Unlike medicine, where you sort of get to the end of the term and then that's it, like, you can spend however long, 2 weeks sitting at home doing nothing. For veterinary, you have to do a certain amount of placements, like, in the holidays. In your preclinical years, so up until third year or second year at other unis, you have to do 12 weeks. So that's 12 weeks doing things like lambing or dairy work or working in like a cattery. And that is 100% the worst thing about Cambridge or any doing veterinary as a whole, is definitely the like preclinical EMS placements, because no one wants to spend 2 weeks doing unpaid work that literally involves like shoveling, can I swear? Shoveling shit. Like, no one wants to do that. And so that's the worst thing about the vet course. But you do that to sort of get an idea of like, oh yeah, this guy's not incompetent and can actually like hold a dog. And then in the final 3 years, you do 26 weeks of clinical placements, which sounds really daunting, and it is a lot of weeks to try and fit into breaks. And it's difficult because you get to the end of the holidays and you're like, oh my God, I need a break. And then you start term and it's like, hang on, I feel like I've not had a break at all. So that is difficult, but the clinical placements are so good, and that's where you'll learn the most of what you'll then practice in daily life. In final year, as much as you're in hospitals, you're in a hospital, which is where they'll get all the like really complicated stuff. And so you're learning amazingly cool cases, but it's not necessarily the stuff you'll see on like a daily basis. It's in the like clinical placements that you have to do in the holidays, which is where you'll like learn the basics and learn what you're doing on a daily basis. It's quite variable. Some people get really good practices, some people get really bad ones, and it also gives you opportunity, as I mentioned it before, about the whole money thing and whether colleges can provide money and like financial support. But if you can, like, I'd really recommend trying to get placements in cool places. So Michael, the other vet at Sydney, he's going to South Africa to do a placement. I'm just booked to go to India. And so like you can really go far afield and do really cool stuff to make it a bit more interesting. So yeah, try and do that if you eventually go into veterinary. Then in third year you do something different. So in my case, I did basically biology, but physiology, development and neuroscience. And you basically study just science for a year and you don't do anything veterinary related. There's no practicals for veterinary. It's all just to do with the science course. Then you graduate with that degree, if you pass, and then you move into fourth and fifth year, which are then still lecture content, quite a lot of lecture content, but now more clinical based, so much more like practical application stuff, before you then head into final year, sixth year, which is all rotations in the hospitals. So all you do then is, there's no lectures or anything, it's all just working with the vets in the hospital.
And what's the workload like?
So that's probably another thing that I was scared about actually before coming. I expected that it was going to be like loads of work and I wouldn't be able to cope with it. I don't think that's true. I think, so usually in first and second year you have supervisions for each of your subjects once a week. So in first year that's 3 a week, in second year it's maybe like 4, sometimes even 5 supervisions a week. Most of them will set an essay, which sounds really daunting when you're like, oh my God, how am I going to write 3 essays a week? They're not that, I mean, especially first and second year ones, you literally write them off the lecture notes, and so it doesn't take that long to do. So I'd say in first and second year, at least 2, maybe 3 essays a week, sometimes more. And then also usually like a lab report, again, which didn't really take very long. And then third year, it's a bit different. It depends on your subject. Some subjects are still quite like regimented in that they set you work. For PDN, for my subject, like we didn't get any set work apart from we had a dissertation to write. And so that was the most relaxed year by far, because I'd have like 9 lectures a week. Oh yeah, I forgot to say actually in first and second year, we'd have more like 2 or 3 a day. As in third year, I'd have 6 to 9 a week. And so that was nice in that I didn't have any set work, so I could just focus on like watching the lectures. And then fourth, fifth and sixth year, again, sixth year is very different, but in fourth and fifth year, there's no real set work either. It's much more like self-directed. There's, on average at the minute, we're doing about 14 hours of lectures a week, plus practicals. So on Mondays and Wednesdays, we have like rotation practicals, which are more like, say like anesthesia for a morning or radiology for a morning. But other than that, you don't actually have any set work. And then final year, like I said, it's all rotations, so there's no set work, it's just working on the wards.
How did you manage with the workload?
I hate leaving things till last minute. That's not to say that I do everything like I'm a neek and that I do everything like as soon as I get it. That's not the case, but I don't like being the type of person that sort of like leaves something until the night before. I'll try not to if I can. And so I'd start early with getting stuff done. I also think that if you try and get everything that was done that week done in that week, it helps massively. If you start having a backlog of lectures that you've not watched or you've not written like notes for, building over into the next week, and then you're like, oh well, I'll just build it over into next week. Suddenly you get halfway through term and you've already got a massive list of lectures that you need to catch up on. And that not only like ruins your then mentality for the second half of term, because you're constantly having to think in the back of your mind that you've got stuff to catch up on, it also makes your holidays a bit of a pain because you just spend them catching up rather than actually working, rather than like relaxing. And so that's my mentality. I try and get everything that was done or everything that's supposed to be done that week done in that week. I'm also not the type of person, some people, I really respect it because I wish I could do it, are the type of people that say, I'm going to do a working day from 9 till 5 and then not do anything after and just work solidly for that like you would if you were going for a job. I guess it depends when you work better. I work better in the evening, so I quite like staying up until like 10, 11 to finish a bit off and then sleeping in the next morning. Like that's what I'd much prefer to do. And so you just get into a groove of doing what you, and after, especially because it's such a long course, by the 4th year or even by the 3rd year, you're kind of so used to doing what works for you that it's kind of normal and you just slot into it really easily.
Very similar sort of question. What advice would you give in terms of revision and exams?
So much like I said with work and trying to get things done sooner rather than later, the worst thing you can do for revision is leave it until last minute. So it's a bit different in 4th year and 5th year in that rather than having exams at the end of the year, we have them at the end of every term. And so automatically you're going to have to leave it slightly later because you're still learning content right up until the exams. But if you can, especially for A levels where you usually finish content sort of, I don't know, maybe March time, if your school's not bad, then you've got a sort of 2-3 months to just revise. I would advise to start even earlier than that and not do loads before that, but just keep it ticking over. Say like if you're in 2nd year at 6th form, maybe once a week, just have a look at something that you did the previous year in 1st year of 6th form, especially now the exams for sciences are all done at the end of the 2nd year rather than having some in the 1st year and some in the 2nd year. You need to keep the 1st year stuff ticking over as well. So yeah, start earlier. And also the biggest piece of advice I would really advise following is using exam questions. If you're just going to base your revision off solely your notes or solely a teacher's notes, it's not going to work. You need to know exactly the style of question that the examiner is going to ask, and you'll do that many and you'll realise that they repeat, that suddenly you'll just know the mark schemes before you've even looked at them, because you see, oh well, that question's like that question that I've done 10 times before, even though it's worded slightly different or they've used a different example. They're more or less the same, and so you can just slot answers in really easily. So yeah, start early and use questions right from the start. Don't use questions just from when you think you've revised it all. Start them like when you start revision. Even if you'll get them wrong, it's normal. But gradually, as you do them more and more, you'll get so used to them that they'll be easy.
What do you think is the best/worst thing about being a Cambridge vet?
Best thing, or one of the best things, is that unlike most other vet schools, and if not all, Cambridge is in Cambridge for the whole 6 years. So most of the vet schools, after your first 2 years or maybe 3 years, I'm not really sure, for the final years you then move to some other town where their like hospital is, and in some cases it's like miles away. I would hate that purely because like I've come to Cambridge because I like Cambridge and I want to stay in the centre where all my friends are, and like I just really like it. And so that's definitely one of the big positives about Cambridge is it's all in the centre. Well, the hospital is not, but it's like 5 minutes cycle, so it's not far at all. And then the worst thing is, well, it depends. I really like this, but I think on a whole, if I'm speaking on behalf of the vet group as a whole, it would be the exam essays. So no other vet school has to do essays for either like work that they get set during terms or at the exams. It's all multiple choice or small answer questions. Cambridge has essays as well in 1st, 2nd and 3rd year. I like that. I'm better at essays than I am at multiple choice or that sort of thing, and so that's why I like it. But I think on the whole, people find that really annoying, that it's like, I didn't sign up to do a humanities degree, why am I writing essays? Like, I'm here to do veterinary. It's also quite time consuming, like, you know, trying to not only revise the content but then also practice essay writing skills. Like, that does take time. So that's probably what most people would say is a bad thing.
Okay. Life outside of work. Do you want to describe your social life, clubs, societies, all that stuff?
I've been a fairly big member of the boat club for the whole time at uni, and probably will be until the end. So I started as a cox, did that for 3 years, and then last term decided that I can't be a cox all this time. I have to try rowing, because otherwise I'm just going to get bullied for shouting at people saying you're not doing it properly when I can't do it myself. So I decided to novice row last term, which I really liked. I did a bit of coaching as well, and then this time I'm back to coxing. I've loved that. Like, it's such a classic thing that people do when they come to Cambridge. Like, I feel like even if you don't want to do it properly, you should try it, because nowhere else really has such like widespread participation in rowing. Like it's huge here. So I've absolutely loved being a part of that. I really, really like it. So as well as like doing all the coxing and stuff, I was also on committee. So started off as social sex, so basically running all the socials. And then for a year I was boat club captain, which again, it was quite a lot of pressure, but I really liked it. It was a bit of a difficult year as well because it was COVID year. And so there was a lot of stuff that I had to do that maybe previous captains didn't, risk assessment wise. But no, I really liked being a captain. It's also great for the CV, so recommend. And then this year, so at the end of the year, Uja's done videos on them. He'll probably do one again this year. We run Mayballs in Cambridge, which is basically like a massive celebration where all the college and like people from out of college come and have a big celebration. And this year I'm on the committee for that, so I'm an ENTS officer, which means me and Maisie, another girl that are doing ENTS, are in charge of getting all the like acts and performers to come and play music or like dance or whatever. So that's been really fun. I've really liked that. It's quite, I think it will be quite stressful in the build up to it because obviously there's a lot of pressure and it's like a massive event to try and organise and people are spending a lot of money, but it's also like really rewarding and we get free tickets. So it's the main reason.
How do you go about balancing work and your social life?
Well, rowing makes balancing work and rowing easy because it's at 6 a.m. in the morning. So that's quite handy. But in terms of like general social life, it goes back to trying to stay on top of things. And if you get stuff done within the week, actually realistically, there's not going to be that much work within the week. It is easily doable. And so as long as you've not got a big backlog of stuff that you're trying to catch up on, you can spend like a few evenings a week like doing other stuff, if not every evening if you've planned it really well. And that's one thing that's quite nice about uni is that in some ways the normal meet time for like people having a bit of a chill together is like 9 p.m, which like, I don't know, before uni it's sort of a bit unusual to meet that late, whereas at uni it's like normal because people work up until that point and then at 9 p.m. like you just go and chill in someone's room for like an hour or 2 hours and it's just really nice. And that's another advantage about Cambridge as well, is the clubs, as much as they're not the best, they're also like 10 metres down the road, literally, for Fez, which was RIP, which was one of the best clubs, which was right opposite Sydney. I'd leave my room and then I was there. And so if you wanted to go on a night out but then knew you had to get up early the next morning, like it's not a big deal because you could leave like relatively soon after without having to spend loads of money on a taxi. So in that regard, Cambridge is pretty good for being so small that everything's on the doorstep.
What is your best memory from Cambridge?
I'd say two. One is, so we've been lucky enough, we're the only year actually that are still here to have had a May Ball or had a May Week as it should be. Last year was cancelled and the year before was cancelled. The May Week is the week where like all the May Balls that we mentioned before happen. So it's basically the week after exams finish where everyone, either, you don't have to go to May Balls, it's just basically a week where everyone chills and there's like garden parties or, like I said, May Balls and June events, which is like a smaller version of a May Ball. And so first year May Ball, or first year May Week, sorry, was the best week ever. It's so much fun. Yeah, just with all your friends and like usually the weather's really nice and it was just amazing. And then my second best memory, so with rowing, the biggest events of the rowing calendar in Cambridge are what we call bumps, which happen at the end of this term, so in March, and at the end of the summer term, so in June. And it's basically 5 days in this one of racing where all the boats line up in a big long line and they have to chase each other down the cam. And the aim is to catch the boat in front of you before the boat behind you catches you. And if you bump up, then you start in the position ahead the next day. And we got to Lent bumps, this was 2020, so 2 years ago now. And every boat that we entered, or my old Sydney Sussex Boat Club entered, did like amazingly well. And we all got back to the boathouse and everyone was just on such a high, and like, especially the rowers, they'd not been drinking at all because they're on a drinking ban. And so then everyone like had, loads of like champagne and stuff, and it was just the best day ever because everyone was on such a high from the racing. So yeah, that's another reason to get involved with extracurricular stuff, is you miss out on all that if you don't do it. And so yeah, just throw yourself into everything extracurricular.
And finally, do you have any words of advice or anything you want to say to people applying to vet?
My biggest piece of advice would be it relates back to work experience. It's a long course. And not only is it a long course, but then you go into it and it's maybe not as financially lucrative as, say, a career in medicine is. And so use your work experience and your time before uni to really do your research and make sure that it's something that you want to do, because the last thing you want to do is get here and then be like, actually, like, I'm not sure this is for me. So yeah, make sure that it's what you want to do. And again, because it's such a long course, like, don't just pick a university on a whim. Like, you're going to be there for at least 5 years. So try and think like carefully about where it is you want to go, what things you're after. But other than that, like, don't stress about it. Just enjoy like the whole experience. I've loved like all of uni, and even before uni, like the whole application process. And so just like take it in your stride and you'll be fine.